Okay, I'm Greg Jones, Director of Advocacy for SKILL, Southeast Kansas Independent Living Resource Center. Today it's Independent Living Philosophy and History. This is a brief overview of sort of how we got, where we've been, how we got to where we are today, in just the civil rights movement for people with disabilities and some of the long-lasting social changes that have occurred to enhance the lives of people with disabilities and to allow us to live independently and freely in our own communities, be in control of our own lives. So the independent living movement, I think it begins with using the model of the civil rights movement, is that comparing the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s to the independent living movement or the disability rights of the 70s, 80s, and 90s is very similar. We went from the days of no blacks allowed to a street curb that doesn't allow folks in wheelchairs to become mobile, to pass. It began there, and some of the mere things, some of the stuff is, there was a fellow in Canada by the name of, I think it was Wolfsenberger. And in '72, he came out with this really bizarre study that said people with disabilities should live like everybody else. What a novel concept. And people with disabilities should be allowed to experience not only the successes in lives, but the failures in lives, in their own lives. And so it was moving away from the professional, we'll take care of you model to let people live was a lot of Wolfsenberger. The self-help movement came around in the 80s with well, actually before the 80s is that peer counseling being one of the peer services is somewhat fashioned after AA and NA and those kinds of things, where it all involves conversations and relationships with your peers. Those relationships foster some freedom and independence in and of themselves simply because you don't feel trapped in your particular situation. And along with the self-help and along with some of the independent living movement became demedicalization. You're blind, you're deaf, you're a person in a wheelchair. Bottom line is that you don't need a whole medical staff following you around simply because you're disabled. You just pretty much need the same kind of medical support as everybody else has. Demedicalization it's just a huge significant step to get away from that. We don't need to be taken care of. We need to be given permission to take care of ourselves just like anyone without a disability. And deinstitutionalization, that was a big one when I hit the Kansas scene, is that state hospitals were closing, home and community-based services were opening up, and folks were allowed to leave nursing homes and rehab facilities to come out and get the supports in their own home and community. And their own home and community of their choice, not the choice of a provider or someone else. And once again, it's like, as people with disabilities get to make the same choices as everybody else. One of the things that kind of violates the social norm is that when we think of institution, we think of keeping people safe, and we're going to keep them safe forever, and we're going to try to fix them if we can. And there's many things that happen in an institution that are pretty institutional and very oppressive. And it's going to bed when they tell you, eating what they happen to fix you, taking the medications they tell you to take, and not being involved in any of those real-life living day-to-day situations. The women's movement, I guess this kind of when we talk about civil rights and stuff is that the women's movement, the stuff that the United States government and the way we oppressed women for the first century or two is pretty bizarre. And the women's movement, although it began with suffrage in the teens and the 20s, 19 teens and 20s, but it also came along in the 70s and 80s with the bra burning, and we can go out and hit the world a lick on our own. We don't need a man. That kind of followed up with consumerism is that, don't treat people like a client, don't treat them like a resident, treat them like the consumer, treat them like they're the individual that wants the services, listen to their needs, not create needs for them. And I think that the culmination and the realization of the independent living movement, I think, comes from this phrase from John McKnight. Revolutions began when the people who are as defined as the problems achieved the power to redefine the problem. More and more and more, and our agency is an example of that, is People with disabilities are allowed to guide, direct, and manage their own services and supports. People with disabilities are allowed to guide and direct agencies that allow people to self-support and live in their home and community of their choice. Access and independence, removing societal barriers, not fixing the person with a disability. When people come in our door, they don't come to be fixed. They don't want to be fixed. We don't fix them. What they want is they want the ability to live in a way, in a manner that they choose, not we choose, and have enough support to get through a day. There's lots of civil rights laws that relate to disability. I think and they all, in all reality, they build up to the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was done July 26, 1990 by President Bush in the Rose Garden. And another significant one in 99 was the Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act, which allowed some of the, what did that do? That created the ability for people with disabilities to return to work and to protect their disability determination and to protect a little bit more of their income. It gave them a bigger safety net should they fail in their pursuit of employment. Touching on employment the reality is about 70% of people with disabilities are unemployed. Employing people with disabilities has to move forward, and that's kind of on the cutting edge in the disability world now. This comes from one of my heroes. Judy Heumann took over the Health and Human Services building in San Francisco and was a ringleader of that takeover for 25 days in 1984, I believe. And the whole purpose was she wanted Ronald Reagan to sign the 504 Rehabilitation Act, which was one of the first initial things to step towards the Americans with Disabilities Act. She says what we do best, and then what we believe in. It's independent living is not doing things by yourself. It is being in control of how things are done. Judy Heumann is the first person with a disability to hold an office of assistant secretary. That was a federal position under the Clinton administration. Some famous names, I guess, in the disability rights world are Ed Roberts. He's referred to as the father for independent living. Ed was, I can't name the disability, but Ed as a child was required to sleep in an iron lung. Completed high school, he wanted to go to Berkeley University. They told him, VR told him no, he couldn't do it. He appealed. Berkeley University actually converted a hospital wing to provide Ed a place to live. After being denied VR and then appealing, he became educated, and he had a group of other quads that he referred to as the rolling quads. And Berkeley is kind of known as sort of the birthplace of independent living. Another famous person there, and one of my personal heroes, was Justin Dart. He's referred to as the father of the ADA. Justin was present when the act was signed. Justin was always also fired by the Reagan administration when he testified in front of the Commerce Committee stating that the current rehabilitation system was dysfunctional, it didn't work for people with disabilities, and it was just nuts to keep continuing to squander taxpayer dollars. Needless to say, Ronnie Reagan pulled his letter resignation out that day, and Justin went into the private sector as an advocate. He traveled all 50 states previous to the signing of the ADA and rallied troops. He traveled all 50 states in the 1992 election of Bill Clinton when he ran against Bob Dole. It was just very impressive. Justin was a true hero, is that everyone in life had equal meaning to Justin Dart, whether you were the beggar on the street or the affluent or the most powerful man in the United States. All was one. Wade Blank was a hippie he's the founder of ADAPT, which is kind of the activist group that protests and creates a lot of significant social change for people with disabilities. Wade Blank started out as a recreation director for a nursing home for kids, and he kept getting in trouble and reprimanded for these kids with disabilities are having too much fun. He started out helping a young man take the system to court so he could live in a free and independent lifestyle with his mother. Wade ended up renting an old farmhouse in Colorado, and he turned it into, he was actually helping people get out of nursing homes, and he did a lot of the attendant care himself until he could put in place Medicare programs to figure out how to support people in the community. His biggest claim to fame and when ADAPT came on the scene was they referred to as the Gang of 19 took over a bus in the city of Denver. They camped around the bus. I think it lasted for 44, 46 hours, something like that. Then the outcome was Denver municipality agreed to work towards creating lifts on all the buses. Rosa Parks had to sit at the back of the bus. At that point in time, people with disabilities couldn't even get on the bus. Other famous folks out there, other important people to the movement are Marka Bristow. She's a co-founder of National Council for Independent Living. She's the current chairperson of the National Council on Disability. Lex Frieden, who's held several presidential appointments. He's the first chairman of the National Council on Disability. And Becky Ola, who's personal, I guess, great of mine, and she likes to have a lot of fun, is the co-founder of Justice for All. Her and Fred Fay found Justice for All, which is a group that Justin Dart had a big piece in. Disability. A lot of people, I think, in the real world don't understand disability. Disability is a natural condition of life. We're all going to be blind. We're all going to be in a wheelchair. We're all going to be somewhere if we live long enough. Apologizing for disability is like apologizing for having brown hair. It's silly. It makes no sense. And in our world, it's disabled and proud. Damn it. And that's the message we try to instill to our customers and businesses in the agency and just the world in general. Southeast Kansas Independent Living is, well, first of all, let me just explain Centers for Independent Living. I think that there are probably around 300 centers for independent living across the United States. Many of them are funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration with some pretty minimal grants. Our agency receives $100,000 from the state, about $60,000 from the feds. We're sort of left to our means to do what we see fit with that to create the 5 core services. Centers for Independent Living are private 501(c)(3)s that are community-based, not residential-based. They're customer-controlled. They should be cross-disability, cross-cultural, and once again, non-residential. Core services. By our state grants and our federal grants, we're required to do 4 basic things. 4 pretty significant things in all reality. 1 is system and individual advocacy. 2 is peer support, concept being best people that know how to survive with my disability is someone that has a disability like me. Not the medical person, not the social worker. Someone that's been in a similar situation can guide and direct me much better than someone that's never been there. Information and referral. I will brag about services that are currently available in the community and the changes we've seen through the years, but it's still a very complicated, very convoluted system of, say, getting someone out of the nursing home and making sure their benefits are in place and making sure that what they need to survive is there, or someone that's recently injured, just that getting out of the hospital and making sure that what they have for survival is there. The next is independent living skills training, and that could be, that's a bushel basket full of stuff. That could be budgeting, that could be cooking, that could be showing me how to clean my house, that could be helping me, showing me how to shop, not doing it for me, but coaching me and guiding me in whatever it is I need to be independent. And the reality of that is that whatever I say I need to become independent, not what you tell me or what a doctor tells me or what a social worker tells me, it's what the individual asks us. And the next coming up, and it's not on this particular sheet, is deinstitutionalization. More and more and more as we move forward, we're eliminating the institutional bias. People are leaving the communities. People are coming out into their own homes. Some of them even own homes. We're invading those walls of some of those institutions and bringing those people out. I think the last time I heard a number, and don't hold me to this, but it's millions of people would be a safe way. Millions and millions of people are still in institutional settings, not because that's where they want to live, not because that's where they choose to live,